Welcome, everyone, to our podcast sharing insights and experiences for game studies and engineering students here at the University of Klagenfurt. As you know, GSE blends game analysis with technical skills, and that often involves creating tangible prototypes. While we often think digital, today we're diving into the fundamentals of designing board games and card games. This is particularly relevant for students currently enrolled in modeling sustainability in board games, joint lecture of my guest and me. And also you can apply the core principles to any one game you're making anyway. So it applies to anybody interested in game design. I'm certainly no expert in this area, which is why I'm thrilled to be joined by my colleague Wilfried Elmenreich. Wilfried, thanks for joining us. Could you start by briefly introducing yourself, your background, your connection to games, and your role here at GSE?
Sure. Hi, my name is Wilfried Elmenreich. So I'm one of the teachers in the GEC curriculum, but my background is actually computer science. So I'm a computer scientist by trade, working in the area of technical computer science, computer engineering. So rather working with soldering ions than with board games. But as it turns out, both things can be approached with a similar mindset, and both things can be fun. In both cases, you're building something that people use or enjoy.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'm Matthias, the host, so I'm asking the crazy question and topping up with my own experience, if there is any. So with it, let's lay down the foundations of board game development. So first things first, what is the actual process of creating board games? Where do you start and when does it end?
So the question is, maybe you have already designed a board game. So probably as a kid. So probably as a kid, you have been bored, you have been somewhere, you weren't allowed to pack your favorite board game. So you don't have it with you, and now you want to play something and you're bored. Or you want to make something new and want to play it with your relatives. And then you started just taking a piece of paper, drawing some map onto it or some other elements, and then asking the people to play it. And then probably turns out that there are some difficulties because it's either too easy or impossible to solve. And then if you're really eager into making something out of it, then you are improving it, changing some things, asking probably for feedback or taking the feedback in, or make some small amendments, and then you ask them for playing another round. So usually that's the point where the relatives start to get a bit annoyed, but they still play along, and you do it again, and then you see, you really like it, and you have an idea of what to add to the game. Then you ask them for playing another round. So, and you do this until they say no. And basically that's the process of making a board game. So coming up with an idea, having some general structure in mind. So probably from playing other games. Typically, you're very much influenced by other games that you have played. And then you're going to have a round of playtesting, taking in the feedback, then you updating your game, have another round of playtesting, and then doing this on and on and on and on. And the more often you do it, the better your game gets.
Great. That sounds easy enough. I've designed a few hybrid games, co-developed it with some people. I don't think it's easy for me, maybe not a natural. One thing I was always asking myself, what comes first? Is it mechanics first or theme first? Like go for a space game or go for something with cards and dice? So especially if you have a topic in mind already, like in our course, sustainability, how might students approach that?
Basically, it can do both. You can play around with mechanics and can say, I would like to try to combine this mechanic with another mechanic, and let's see what comes out. So I don't know, or Don't Get Angry Man as a board and say, let's combine it with chess figures to play chess on this board, but with this layout. What would be the outcome? And then basically you play around with mechanics, come up with something new and interesting. Or of course, as you indicated, you can also start from the theme. Did you say, I want to do something that has the theme of sustainability, or something that has the theme nature. I want to make a game that somehow conveys nature. And this doesn't define yet if it's going to be a card game, if it's going to be a game where you place things or where you move around figures. So the mechanics are quite open. but it's already clear that it should be something that is related to nature and to plants, and probably you will use the color green a lot.
How important is it actually to combine those mechanics with the theme? Can you just make Don't Get Angry Man and paint it all in green and then it's sustainability, or is it more?
In general, you can put a theme over each game. So whatever you have, you can use it to make a different game out of it. For example, with chess, chess is uh, chess is mostly mechanics and rules, but of course it already comes with kind of a theme because you have a king and you have pawns, some that basically are just there for fighting and blocking. So it's basically a war game. So probably making chess figures and the chessboard in a way that it becomes a war game is very easy to do. But you can also think of something different, like make a game that's cool. So having instead of the king, probably it is a teacher and the queen is another teacher with different abilities, obviously. And then having some goal that I don't know, there is a competition between schools or between classes. So and then again, we can already go further and let's make it a Harry Potter theme because it's about schools and it's about wizards. And we can also do this and probably we can do all this while still adhering to the original chess mechanics and chess rules.
Yeah, then I definitely can reference all the chess modifications that Robert pointed out. Maybe you can do something like all the pawns can say a spell and it's inzendo and you have to do it with your hand. Yeah, that's actually a very good example. Thank you for pointing that out. I never saw it from this angle, actually. Yeah, so when we start designing a board game, what are the essential tools? What do we need? Do you have any idea? I mean, I know you have a lot of experiences. What do you bring?
So basically, you would need some ideas, and it's actually not that easy to come up with everything on your own. So if you happen to be in a team, it's much easier to do because then you have different ideas. You need to think what would go together well, what doesn't. So in this case, starting with a team is already great help. Also, it is helpful to have played a lot of different board games beforehand. So if you're like limited to like a few of your board games, that might be very good, but that will definitely limit your imagination. And if you look around what is there, what are probably board games you don't like so much, what are board games you hate, but still have a look at them. And perhaps you come up with an idea of the things that you hate and to replace those rules, those mechanics with different things, and out comes something new that you like. So you can do this. You should also not consider too much time just thinking and pondering, but also starting with designs. So taking an empty piece of paper, start drawing something. Think of, if it is a board game, of some board layout that would be the basis for your game. And you can also think of what kind of figures you would have. Don't do the mistake of over designing them in the first place. So I know of people that like start then to make the board on the computer with very nice graphics and to print it out. And then they already need a fancy printer because it needs to be perfect in production. And then they start designing all their figures with a 3D program. And then they start to 3D printing it. And probably you can also paint them. Okay, that's a nice hobby to do. But if you really time limited, which, for example, in our course, the time to come up with a prototype for a board game is basically 1.5 days. And basically the prototype should be already playable on the first day. So you are quite limited in time. And if this is the case, and to be honest, most of us will be limited in our time. So we cannot spend in a lot of time on many things. So we have to be quick if we want to get to something. And in this case, I would say just use simple things. Draw the figures first on paper, probably glue them to some existing figure or coin if you need it. Play it on paper. That also means if something doesn't work out, it is not so hurtful to just change it. If you see that your board design just doesn't work, you can even tear it up and start with a new one. It wasn't so much work. It was done in the base design was drawn in 5 minutes. So just another 5 minutes, you have a new one. And that's easier than if you would start to make everything perfect. So of course, we're used to games. If we buy games, they come in nice boxes. So with lot of color and nice figures and stuff like this, so that it is like perfect, a castle. To be honest, if you just want to have a castle that marks a spot, which actually is the job of this part here, then you can just draw the castle and just put it flat on the board. And in the end, when you want to do something fancy, then you can come up with designs like this.
Great. So it's mostly play a lot of games, then start with your design as soon as possible. Don't waste time. Don't burn time on thinking about aesthetics. Go to the first prototype and then focus on the stuff that makes it playable as soon as possible. So to save time there. That's great. That's actually also my idea with digital games. But yeah, I hope it sticks to the audience. We'll see. We'll see. The seminar is coming up. What about the physical stuff? You said take a piece of paper, draw something. So you would need paper, you need pencil. Start with a board. You will need cardboard. Anything else?
If you want to make a card game, then of course you need to make cards. Either you design them on the computer and print them, but then you have the problem that if it's important that the cards have a card feeling when you hold them in your hand, it actually makes a big difference. That is a problem if you print them on standard paper. There it is better to have like empty cards. You can get them if you just look for blank cards and just draw on them quickly with some pen what the card is about. That is more of a card feeling than a card that is printed from the computer on a standard printer, which has nicer graphics, but not just the feel. So you probably need those cards. You probably need some elements. So for example, if you want to have some things that you can place, then you need some things that you can place. For example, those things. Let me eat one. No, let me not eat one because those are figures from the game of Go. So these are plastic chips. Careful, it's your children. Basically, you can use them. Oh, where's my Go board? They're usually used on a Go board, and usually they on Go they are just placed once, and once they're placed, they stay. They stay. And you have also to think what are your mechanics of the game. For example, in chess, the figures that you have there, they typically move. So you push them around. So do you want things to be laid out there or to be pushed? This is a mechanical thing. This is not so much dependent on the type of material you have available, because basically you can do this with all kind of materials that you either push them or place them or let them hop around, whatever is your mechanics. Probably you need some dice if you want to add random elements into a game. And then, of course, there are the standard dice, 6-sided dice, numbered from 1 to 6. Then in some games, there are these color dice, typically for children, so that they don't have to read the numbers, but just name the colors, which is easier for them. Then, of course, you can also get blank dice that you can paint on and decide what your dice should be on. So you can make a game like this, which is a zombie-themed game. So of course there is a die with a brain on it.
You need that. Otherwise, the zombies are not interested.
Definitely, yeah. And there's also this explosion, which is the shotgun you also use on the zombies. So having dice, having probably custom-made paintings on those would be something you might need. Then, of course, especially the people who do role-playing games, they know that there is not only the 6-sided dice, but there are also other kinds of dice. So there is one that has just 4 sides that can come up. So if you need a random number between 1 and 4, this is the one to use. Then, of course, the famous one is the 20-sided one, because this can do
from
numbers
Dungeons and
between 1 and
Dragons.
20. So probably you should think of having more than one kind of dice. Also, if you have 2 dice, you can add them up, which is a common mechanic in many games. But just consider, if you know Saddles of Catan, then you definitely notice that the different outcomes are not evenly distributed. So
Yes.
there is the 7 is the most frequent one, and all the other ones are less frequent, down to the 2 or the 12, which is very hard to get. So you
It's one
change
of
the distribution.
That's a fundamental law of statistics. So we can go into that. I studied math, but I don't know the English terms. I studied in German.
So it is a difference if you have a 12-sided dice or if you have 2 6-sided dice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can't do the snake eyes with a die.
That's true, yeah. So you need those some basic materials you can play with. Probably you should also get some crayons. Can look if you still have some, because if you do everything just in a blue or black colored pen, for prototype might work, but to mark some things, it's definitely helpful to use a little bit of color.
Yeah, actually, when I do something like that, I really like to have different kinds of pens, like fine liners, or I don't know the English word for Tuschestifte, which is a ink pen which can do larger strokes, and they are really black, so that also really helps to put in contrast. Then the crayons are awesome to fill everything with color, of course, and felt pens are also great. Watercolors, if you're an artist. And what is especially important are these waterproof markers, maybe in a few different colors, because some things, they're just not writable without waterproof stuff. Maybe glossy cards or dice or something like that. And scissors, tape, and glue.
Definitely, yes. Also, you should
Okay.
not restrict yourself to like one type of game. So like just having one flat board and some figures that you move on them. Think of also of mechanics that might require some other aspects. Like for example, something where you can fold the paper to, I don't know, make a connection in space for a faster than light space travel game. So you could bring in physics by folding space, literally.
Nice. That's a good idea, actually. I like that. Yeah, Robert did say something about the chess game or variant where those pawns that were out of the game were put on another board and played a second game on there, and you had to play it twice.
That's actually quite interesting, this kind of game. You play it in two teams. So you have 2 versus 2 players. And what is fun, because suddenly it is a team game. And what is really interesting is that it adds another mechanic to chess. Because usually in chess, you have your figures on the board and then you're moving them. And now suddenly you have another mechanic, which is you got just the figure from your team member that just caught this figure from their opponent. And now you have it. And instead of making a regular move, you can decide to use this and place it in the game. So you have a place mechanic added to chess. And actually it works. There are some rules in this that you're not allowed to use it to give a check or checkmate, because otherwise it would be too powerful. But apart from this is something that extends chess with another mechanic and still makes the game playable and fun and well balanced.
Nice. Yeah, those are actually the things to look out, to change some small thing and then make the game even more engaging. That would be awesome. Yeah, so I'm also mostly in the digital world, and the last board games I bought had these digital companions and everything. So digital tools are entering the world of card games and board games. Anything you recommend digital tools for creating board games or to consider for creating board and card games?
Okay, for creating games, there are some tools like, I don't know, some app that in the easiest case might just throw the dice for you and tell you what was the outcome. But there is a large potential here to also use the digital component to somehow enhance the board game in a way it could not have been without it. Because, for example, if I just replace the question is if this is even that helpful, because those are smaller than my mobile phone. Of course, mobile phone usually I have with me, but who doesn't have dice with them all the time?
Of
But
course.
actually throwing them is fun. So we have to be careful not to eliminate parts that are actually fun.
Yes, like the tactile experience of cards, for instance. It's basically missing if you put all the cards in the phone.
But there are some possibilities where you can use the digital part to add things to the game. For example, in a board game jam, we once designed a game that was hybrid, and the hybrid part were the things that were not under your control. So you had to, in this game, you had to manage ships and cargo and fuel for the ship and food for the people on board. And so all these were basically under your control. If you had 5 fuel, you knew you could still move for the next 5 steps. If you had 3 food, you knew you could feed your people for the next 3 rounds. But what you didn't know was what would you find on some place on the map? What would happen if you interact with some, in this case, it was the harbor masters that were deciding on their own if they would allow you to go into the harbor or not. So there were parts in this game that were outside your control. And we designed it in a way that all the things that were outside of your control were in the computer, and all the things that were within your sphere's control, where you knew what would happen, you had to manage them. So you still had to do a lot of things that could have been easily automated by the computer, but all those things were left to you. But just the things that were unknown were in the computer on purpose.
Nice. So a little bit of the simulation was offloaded to the computer out of control of the player, and the players then had to react to that with their own planning and strategy.
Yeah, it was just one possible design pattern that you can use to integrate it. Another possibility, of course, would be to identify the parts that are not so fun. For example, if you have a game with money and there is a lot of effort into counting the money and probably exchanging it to have smaller or larger ones to exactly pay prices, to calculate how many things you can buy from your current amount of money. And if those things are kind of sumptuous to do in the game, you could easily offload those things to the computer, and then the computer would do those things for you, leaving you to the parts that are more fun.
Okay. Okay. That's a good approach. I like that. So speaking of developing games, of course, playtesting is very important. You already said. Any approaches that you want to mention about playtesting and iterative design? How would you approach that? I mean, I have a clear idea for the digital games. I'll add up on what you say, but I don't want to bias you.
Of course, in playtesting, you have to first look whom you have as a playtester. So usually, especially in early phases of your design process, probably it's you yourself playtesting the game or the colleagues in your group. But they already know the idea of the game. They already know how it's supposed to be played. And this definitely puts a bias on them, how they will play the game. So having other people, probably if it's like in our lecture, it's multiple groups working concurrently on their games, then it just makes sense to borrow people from other groups that haven't seen the game yet and then play it. And then, of course, there's also this blind playtesting where you don't give them any help. You don't tell them how the game is supposed to be played. You probably just give them the materials, give them a list of rules, and then they should play, and then you look how it turns out. And probably it will be very surprising for you because they would do some things totally different than you thought they should be done or they can be done. But there is also this idea that, but this is basically for a very polished game, that the game materials themselves are so well designed that they hint at the correct usage for the game. So that even without having the game instructions, you're more or less able to play the game correctly, because whatever is on the board, whatever is in the specific design of the figures, it's already hinting you what you can do. For example, if there is like, don't know, some part in the board where exactly this figure fits in, then you know I have to put this there. But this is for a very well polished game, so this is rather the end, or if you're trying to make your game more professional. For the initial one, I guess some instructions would be necessary. This is totally okay. What you have to consider is the other people in the board game lecture that you ask for playtesting the game. They have heard the same introduction as you are. They have worked with the same materials. So they already have a similar mindset to your group. So they will also playtest the game probably in a way that is favorable for your outcome, but is not necessarily representative for how an average person would play it. So you would also need an independent third group of playtesters that you can use to playtest the game. And then the question is whom we are aiming for. Do we want to make a game that appeals to players that are not playing many games, or to expert players? Because the expert players might catch concepts very quickly. On the other hand, they might get bored if something is not possible what they would expect that is possible. So also the type of your playtesters will play a role in how you can further develop your game.
Nice. Yeah. So basically, you have to consider the target group and the playtesting group, the population you're using. The people in the seminar have the same mindset. That's actually a very good note. I didn't think of that, but that's clear. But they are good for feedback if your game can transport the theme of the lecture, because they have the idea what it should do. And then you have to bring in other people to actually test the game or even blind test the game, which is actually a cool concept. Because of course, in digital games, you always try to go towards the blind test. But in this case, you're playing with the people and then observing them. So it's always participatory, and the blind test is not. So that's actually pretty cool. I liked it a lot. So what I would recommend, it's not what I'm always doing, but I'm trying to do it, is having this playtest journal. Do you think it makes sense for board games too? Just jotting down notes, what people said, and then revisiting them later on, like 2-3 hours later, and see if you could solve it with the next prototype?
Definitely. Also, you should not just let other people playtest your game and then just have a break for yourself and get a coffee and go somewhere else. But you really need to observe them. You need to write down the issues while they're happening without interrupting them, without asking them. So basically taking notes or probably even videotaping the session, if of course, if the playtesters are okay with that, would be helpful, yes.
Nice. Yeah, actually, I'm very much into AI nowadays, and what I really like is recording those things and then letting AI transcribe it. You can do that locally, actually, and then asking the AI what were the issues of the playtest and stuff like that. That works out sometimes really well, because sometimes you overlook stuff. You still have to do it manually, but this adds to the whole thing. But of course, don't overdo it if you haven't done it. It's too much for 1.5 days.
I would definitely recommend to do it the first time manually, because
Absolutely.
then you know what you would expect from the AI to do for you, what would be the outcome, because otherwise you get just something and you don't know if it's good or not.
Yeah, and also I would just use it as a second pair of eyes. So I would underline the issues anyway from the transcript, and then let the AI, without my annotations, decide what they find. So second pair of eyes principle, sparring partner. That's I think the better approach. Okay, so you've been doing the seminar a lot. I've been helping out here and there, but you're the mastermind behind it. What are the hallmarks of quality and the common pitfalls for you? So what are the games you really enjoyed and why? And what are the typical games that you get? And how do you think they can be improved?
So the answer is, in both cases, I think simple games. So I really enjoyed simple games if they were well balanced and you could play them well. But also I was not so fond of the simple games in a different meaning. If the games were just basically copies of very simple games that most people probably know or have played. So like if you have a snakes and ladders mechanic, which basically doesn't leave you much agency in what to do or how you can play the game. Also similar problem with this game, Don't Get Angry Man game, because there is some agency but not much, and also everybody already knows it.
Yeah.
There are also games like Monopoly, which is a very specific game. There is lots of theory of meaning behind it. If games are designed in a way that they're just a ripoff of those games without much invention, that I could rather just play the original, then those are games in a way that they are simple in a way that I don't want to play them. There are also games that are not simple, that are very complicated, a lot of elements. Usually, if one tries to design such a game in 1.5 days, it's very difficult to come up with something that is playable. So I still love this game. I'm very impressed by the outcome, how far they got, but it is not a game that you can play right away, because it still needs probably a couple of weeks or months
Yeah, also if it's
work.
complicated, the playtests take a lot of time.
Yes, and even if you need to already learn so much until you can start playtesting it. So there are like of the typically very complex games, even if the manual, if the instruction is well written, it takes you probably half an hour to read everything until you can play it for the first time. And then you still can have to look up things in the manual all the time in order to play it. And now think of such a game with that complexity made in 1.5 days, without all the sophistications that the final game already had, and without having a manual that is well written, but just a manual that is a first draft. So it's almost impossible for the playtesters to play this game well within limited time of like 1 hour or so. And then within the time that is given in the seminar, usually it is a concept of a game, which is nice, but it is not a game that is ready to play.
Great. So that's easy. You don't like simple games and you like simple games. That's a good guideline. No, what I'm thinking of is we had a few examples like Monopoly and chess. One good, one bad. I know of a few others. You said ropes and ladders. There's activity, of course, that many people try to integrate. Well, Uno is very popular, as far as I know. Do you have any inspirational examples, maybe from the groups of students you mentored, or also what you think people should take a look at, even play it before they go to the sustainability board game jam?
The problem, if I would name now some games, then those games become the new common ground that everybody will use. So I would just say play as many games as possible.
Okay.
And if possible, if you can choose from different games, try to find those that have different concepts, different mechanics.
How would you approach that? Like, if
So
I'm
for
not a
example,
board game player,
yeah,
if I want to go and play a lot of board games, how would you start?
for example, if you look at that game, it's not so well known, the Mad game.
Mad, I know it.
You know it, okay. You have this, and for the Mad game, you also have the pins
Yes.
and money and dice and cards. This is basically Monopoly.
Yes.
So even if you haven't played this game, it becomes immediately clear that this game, if you have played Monopoly, then probably if you want to play a second game that is quite different from the first one, probably not this one to choose, because this one is just more of the same. So just by looking at the materials, I think you can already find out which games are well apt to open your mind. So for example, this game here. So in many games, if you have small plates like this, then the mechanics usually are that you lay them down on the ground, place them somewhere, and they stay there. So, but in this game, which is basically a variant of Chinese chess for children, that's why it is simpler. You have those plates here, which are actually figures, and they are moving. So you're moving them, and it's basically like a chess game, but it's still quite different. So even if you're a chess player and know chess well, you play this for the first time, you are stunned by how this works out.
Yeah.
Having simple rules and still having quite some complexity. So you need a lot of moves if both players play perfectly until this one ends. Also, it just has this 3 by 4 board. But chess is 8 times 8.
Yeah. So it's a lot simpler from
A
the
lot simpler.
strategy, because you don't have to consider 64 cells, but a lot less, of course. Nice.
And then, of course, you should look into different genres, because we were talking now mostly about board games, but there are also card games. There are card games anyway. There are a lot of card games that you play with a standard deck of cards. Even with standard deck of cards, you have already hundreds of different games you can play. And then, of course, there are card games with specifically designed cards. It's probably some other things like markers or dice or whatever, but they are still card games. So you can look into the genre of card games, what is out there. And it makes sense to look at like what is considered an excellent card game. Probably you will stumble upon Magic the Gathering then, which is very interesting mechanic. And then if you look at newer games, you will see that the mechanics that were introduced in this game have been then defined like a part of the genre in a very strong way. So you have these things. And then there is a third genre, which are, I would call them dice games, where you have like the dice not just as a source of adding randomness to the game, but where the dice themselves are very important. Like this zombie game is just consists of a box and just dice, nothing else.
Yeah, you can. That's what I thought when you showed the zombie game. You can also use a dice as a state indicator. So you can turn it over once. You can set it somewhere. So it can be pawn. It can be a state. It can be very much everything.
Can be a skeleton. It can be a ghost. It can be a goblin. And in this game, you have the black ones, and then you have the white ones to fight them. And for example, you have the mage. So what did we have? We had the goblin. For the goblin, you need the knight. We have a thief and a hero. So this case, we have a game with dice that indicate also what kind of players you have and your opponent has. And then there are also some markers that will help you to know how much money do you have, what items have you gathered. But it is still basically a dice game. So has no dedicated board. It is the dice and your imagination.
Yeah, I always think of Rory's, I think it's called Rory's story cubes, where you use the dice not to dice something, but to start creativity, which turns all that, instead of a decision, you start a creativity process. So it's turning it around. And these two examples you showed are also the same way. Yeah, what I would throw in addition to that, if people are searching out for that, is that if I'm searching for a board game, I'm always searching out for the ones that won the awards. Because then I know that a lot of people like it, and preferential attachment then teaches me that if a lot of people like it, then I'm also highly likely to like it. And that's where I end up. So that's the easy way to scan those lists. Or do you know of anything around the university or in the university where we can play board games? Do we have a ludothek or something like that?
Yes, we have. In the library, you can borrow board games.
I heard the rumor, but I don't know specifics. So that's great.
It's in the top floor, at the top floor. There is the place where you can get the board games, yes.
Nice.
Yes.
Okay, so gather a group of students and go there and then read the rules.
Regarding the games that won some awards, that's definitely true. But you should also, okay, here we have
I have that one too.
the Game of the Year 2017, already some time in the past. Also, sometimes if you have newer games that won these awards, they will combine multiple ideas and multiple mechanics into something that is great to play. So you should play it, and then you should think, what was the things that really made it interesting for you? Because you cannot just take a modern award-winning game and then say, okay, something like this I have to make, then I'm done. Because the problem is that those things are quite complex and have many different aspects in it. And this is probably, for starting with a game, too much. So
That's
either
true, yes.
if you go for a new game, try to identify part of it that is interesting, or look also at the old games. Look at the old games that won awards. Look at the old games that defined the genre, because there you will find the basic mechanics. But go beyond the standard 3 or 4 games that you know. There have always been many games out there. And if you look at older games, typically they are simpler because also the players were less willing to invest a lot of time into a lot of reading and a lot of complex interaction. And this also will help you then to identify simple mechanics that work well.
That is an extremely good point. I didn't think of that. I have to say that because those games are really engaging. They are fun, but of course you have to have this knowledge about the mechanics because they're already combining it like Dorfromantik or something like that. And that's then a huge problem, of course. And the older games, that's the go-to. I absolutely agree with you. I didn't think of that, but that's good. Yeah, but somewhere in between Monopoly and the Exploding Kittens, time-wise.
My mother-in-law, for example, has a cupboard full of games that she bought in the 80s.
Oh, okay.
This is actually a treasure.
Okay.
So there are so many games in there, and a lot of them I didn't know. There were so many ideas in those games, and then I looked them up, and I saw they were also award winners in their respective years. Also, they were much simpler.
Nice.
So if you have this opportunity to like check out old games, definitely go for it.
Nice. Speaking of checking out old games, I know that in digital games we have this library thingy where we try to preserve the old games. Do you know of any preservation activities where you can actually take a look at games from the 80s or something like that?
I don't, probably there exist some, but I'm not aware of them.
Okay.
I know that there are some libraries or some ludotheks that gather games, and of course they also collect older games.
Yeah.
So probably if you go there, if you go to the library, also at the University Library of Klagenfurt, there are many games that are also of older date.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Speaking of getting board games from the internet, I've seen that some people actually publish their games on itch.io. So you can print your own cards, print your own board or something like that. And I've noted down a question about open culture because that's something we support in our course, and about licenses. So how do we actually share a game? What do we have to consider for that?
Yeah, the traditional way of getting your game to the public was that you made a prototype, that you send it in to some of the publishers like Ravensburger or Pegasus Games or Schmidt Games, many German names among those companies, and to send it in there. And if they accept it, that they will say, oh, this is something they would produce, then they will make a large batch and it will be available in every shop. And of course, this also requires that your game basically has an appeal to a majority of people, which probably is not the kind of game that you want to make. You probably have if you have a game that is very specific, that is only for fans of some certain story or book or whatever, then probably there are very few people that would play this game. And then you have the problem that you cannot get it published that way. And also for the publisher, it's a lot of risk because they have to do this production. Then they have a lot of games they have to sell somehow. And if the game doesn't sell, they have a big problem because they've already invested in the production. Now with the internet, with the availability of 2D and 3D printers, there is a nice opportunity to publish games as so-called printables. So basically, you just publish how your game is played, and then what you need for the game, and either it is standard things like you need dice or you need chess figures where you know, okay, people would be able to get those things easily, probably from games they're already on, or just paper things that are just printed and then just used to put on the board and to play. And those printables, they can be complex and it's easy for other people to play them. Of course, it's more difficult to sell them. You said itch.io. On itch.io, you can sell them. On itch.io, you can also make games available for free. To my experience, most of the games on itch.io are available for free. So it's hardly a platform you can make a lot of money, but it is a good platform where you can distribute your game design, be it a digital one or an analog one. And this is also an idea, to come back to the original question, this is also an idea that we would like to follow in our course. So the people should make a game and they should also document the game, explain in a document how the game can be reproduced. So what has to be printed, what kind of cards we need, what kind of materials are needed to play the game, besides of the actual rules of the game. So having this document explaining how to recreate the game. And then we also ask the students to put a license on this game. That means to think of what would they want to allow or disallow others to do with the game. And for example, for a license, if you make something that is sufficiently creative, where I would say a game usually definitely counts, unless it's totally ripoff of something, then you own the copyright to this game. And others cannot use it or reproduce it commercially without your permission. And with open source licenses, you basically tell others, yeah, you're allowed to recreate this game. You're allowed to also republish it. And then there are some licenses that say, but you have always to put my name on it, as I'm the original inventor. Or I can also say, I'm very open. You can take it, you can improve it. You don't even need to name me. Or I can make a license saying you can take it, you can improve it, but you cannot use it commercially because I made it originally as a game that should not be exploited commercially, and I wanted to stay this game, stay this way, stay the game this way, to have the game being this way and not being used commercially. So there are these possibilities with the licenses. And this is, as you might have already figured out from my introduction, it's not an easy thing because there are so many different licenses and so many possibilities and so many things that you have to take care of. And this is also part of the course that students have to think of what license, what work best for what they want to achieve with their game.
Yeah, I can just add a hint to the audience. When you start or when you want to know more about possible licenses, one license group to start with is the Creative Commons. We can actually put the link in the show notes, but it's just one group of many licenses. So there are very different ways to approach that. But that's a good point. We think what you're doing and how you're giving it away, completely free versus restricting usage and so on and so on. Awesome. I think that gives people a good start. They know our faces. We'll top it up with another session with Xenia about possible board games examples. We'll top it up with another session with Wilfried and me, where I'm trying to tell, or I'm using Wilfried actually for playtesting my ideas, how to get the creative process started. Then we'll have a guest from a company who's actually doing a game in sustainability and wants to have more ideas on that. So 3 more episodes for the sustainability in board games class. So for today, thank you very much. It was incredibly insightful. We have a fundamental overview. We know where to start. For the people from the course, there's a book. Maybe you can reference the book too.
Sure, yes. I would recommend as a starter the Cobalt Guide to Board Game Design. It's a book around 100 pages, so it's not too long, and it contains several chapters from different authors, including Mike Selinker, James Ernest, Richard Garfield, that tell this reference to their respective games they made, specific aspect they want to emphasize on. And so after reading this book, you already know a lot about board game design.
Yes, we'll put the link in the show notes again, so you can click it there if you want to follow up and take a look at the book. Maybe we have a few sample pages. For those people, we have the relevant excerpts. For those people in the class, we have the relevant excerpts, of course, on our internal Moodle server. Yeah, so if you want to give us feedback on our episode, what we did not, if you have further questions, you can use the platform you found us on, which might be Moodle for the course students or YouTube or Spotify. Sorry to the Spotify users now, because some things we just discussed by showing them to the camera, but you'll still learn a lot. Yeah, and you can also email us directly at GSE, Game Studies and Engineering, at AAU Alpen-Adria-Universität. The link to our study program, Game Studies and Engineering, is again in the show notes. If you're interested, please apply, come to Klagenfurt, join us for our great interdisciplinary program. So we learned a lot today. It was awesome. A lot about how to create board games with a few examples, what to do and what not to do. We're totally looking forward to the prototypes we get from the students. We have a massive amount of enrollments. I think it's 65 right now, which tops up what we already had with something like 28. So it's a lot of people. And that's awesome. And also it's an interdisciplinary crowd, which I especially appreciate. So I hope it was valuable for the students first, and then all the audience who comes to us on random occasion. Any final words, Wilfried?
I just can add to this, or second this, that I'm looking very much forward to the games that will be made by our students, probably also to the games made by you, perhaps after watching this episode. And as you indicated, the interdisciplinary teams that will form based on the students that take the course are definitely helpful for making the board games even more interesting.
Awesome. Thanks for that. Interdisciplinarity for the win. And that's it for today. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Bye.